right, good evening. We're going to call this meeting of the workshop for the Lewisville City Council to order. We do have a quorum. Let's see, first up for the session, of course we got green microphones, so you can hear everything. First up is consent and regular agenda item review. Council, if you look in your packets, we have invocation, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Cade, myself with the flags. We have a presentation with the library. Item D1, public hearing, amending Volume 2 of the City Code, UDC. That's going to move all plat approval to staff.
So Claire, this is only for plat approval where there are no variances.
That's right.
So this is going to greatly cut down on P&Z's agendas, right?
Well,
But this is to align with state law.
yeah, so state law gives you the authority to do this, and so we're doing that mainly to provide greater efficiency for our staff, but also to increase our timeliness with reviews. Just realize that we still have to meet our 30-day, is it 30-day shot clock?
Yes.
30-day shot clock. It also allows the developer, if they don't agree with staff, to always appeal that decision to a body, to P&Z, right?
Correct.
And so I think it really covers all our bases, but it really does provide greater efficiency.
All right, item F2, minutes. Item F3, resolution for the joint election services. Right now that's about $20,000. Item 4, regular hearing, 2 alternative standards with outdoor storage for Wing and Walmart.
And Mayor Wing, I've been told, has a short presentation to give out and open.
Okay, great.
So is this also going to be a temporary situation?
No, this is actually going to be a permanent, but it is aligning with all of the regulations that you guys have already told us you wanted us to go forward with. So it's really just to keep them kosher right now before those codes get changed.
5, this is STR conversation. We'll be setting permits at 1:30.
I thought it was on the consent agenda. I told somebody it was on the consent agenda.
Sorry.
Okay. Any questions on the STRs? Item H, reports. And then we also have a closed session item tonight. All right, if there are no other questions or concerns, we do have 2 presentations today before our regular session at 7 p.m. So the first one we have up is Mr. Paul Christina, our Chief Executive Officer of DCTA, to present an update on our Denton County Transportation Authority.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, and then Claire, Gina, coming back around, Chair Gilmore, Board Member Green. I'm joined also this evening by Mr. Austin Frith, our Vice President of Planning and Development. It's a pleasure to be with you to share a general update on what's happening at the Denton County Transportation Authority. The headline starts with where we ended last fiscal year, 2024. DCTA broke an all-time ridership record, delivering 3.2 million trips over all of its services. You see this graph here showing ridership at DCTA since 2011 when the A train started, peaked in 2016, and then hit the pandemic and was really hit hard just like every other transit agency in the country. But the story is the tripling or near tripling of ridership coming out of the pandemic because our member cities, our board of directors understood what their stakeholders wanted, made significant transformative changes in service, implemented the Go Zone operation, which allows people to ride where they are to where they want to go, and that really is the driver of that recovery. However, you see last year A-Train ridership up double digits year over year. You see where Go Zone is flat, but that's a fixed capacity service, so we would expect that, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means here in a minute. The A-Train ridership, like I said, 3 consecutive years of double-digit ridership growth, and now we're in our 4th consecutive year. The A-Train, according to data from the American Public Transit Association, is one of the top performing commuter railroads in the country with regard to ridership growth. And what's crazy about this is if you look at who's north of us, those are dense metro urban areas, and we are right here in the mix. This is a lot to be proud of. What this tells us is that the A-Train is a viable transit product, and that people, as they find their way stuck in traffic on I-35, certainly the construction on I-35 hasn't helped the commuter, and they look to their right or their left and they see the train running by, they say, that feels like a good idea, and they find their way over. And so we're really happy for that and look forward to what the changes that we're pursuing are going to drive. More data about the A-Train, specifically around Old Town and Hebron stations. This is boardings and alightings in fiscal 23 and 24, and then 25 in orange. A boarding is obviously getting on the train, and alighting is getting off the train. And you see anywhere between a 10 and 20% jump month over month over the course of this year. This graph over here tells us that where we're looking at boardings and alightings by station, when you see that most of the boardings and alightings happen at the bookends, that tells us that the A-Train is primarily still used as a commuter railroad. People getting on and off at the bookends and are making the full trip. But you see where Old Town and Hebron land in there. Our challenge and opportunity is to figure out how to make the A-Train even better. And to do that, our board grabbed on to articulate a significant vision over the course of the last couple of years called the A-Train Enhancement Program. What we want to be able to do is improve our runtime on the existing corridor between Denton and Trinity Mills. We want to extend the A-Train for 2 miles from Trinity Mills to downtown Carrollton. We want to improve our peak frequency to 15 minutes. When the schedule is running on a 15-minute frequency, it means you don't care what the schedule is. If you show up at the train platform, you know that before you break a sweat in the summertime, you're going to be on the air-conditioned ride headed north or south. And then we're also working to consider a new station at Corinth. Why is that 2-mile extension so important? Well, if you've heard the news about the project by Dallas Area Rapid Transit for the Silver Line, it's going to connect, it's a commuter railroad that is going to connect the north part of DFW Airport out to Shiloh Road in Plano. With that 2-mile extension, that means that a person could get on at the Old Town station, the Hebron station, or any other station, and for the cost of a regional pass, less than $10, could be at the front door of DFW Airport in about an hour. Don't have to pay to park. About an hour if you're starting at the downtown transit center, less if you're further south. Don't have to pay to park, $40 at the terminal, or pay to park $15 on the outskirts of DFW and then ride a shuttle in. We think that'll be a game changer for the A-Train and how people use it. Another way that we can really enhance the value of the A-Train is by creating places along the railroad. One of the things that we think the A-Train is lacking is really connectivity and tying into the communities that we serve. And the city of Lewisville is leading the way in this regard with our conversation around developing the Old Town Lewisville station. You may be familiar that DCTA owns about 13 acres of property right next to the Old Town station, and this is your Ohala development right next door. What we envision here is a main building, iconic sort of structure, Class A office space, mixed use, retail, public space that would include a DCTA headquarters facility, the potential for a regional attraction like a hotel conference center thing that would fit into that space. And then really the palette for the rest of this is somewhat open, recognizing that we want to try to drive things that will complement the Ohala development that you already have underway right next door. So we've chartered a working group with our board of directors. Chair Gilmore, Board Member Green are members of that, and we're working along with Judge Eads and other members of our staff and consultant team, and we're working to refine this work along with your great economic development team so that we can put out an RFQ and see what the market might have for this development and maintain the momentum that we've gotten over the course of last year. We appreciate Richard and Marichelle's help in putting this all together. So now we'll transition to the GO Zone service, obviously near and dear to the city of Lewisville's heart because you were in the front end of leading the decision making to go away from fixed route to something that would better serve your customers. The short answer, like I said at the front end, GO Zone service somewhat flat year over year last year, but we delivered 860,000 trips on GO Zone overall. It is the biggest microtransit operation that VIA operates in North America amongst their 700 and some odd properties across the entire globe. And so DCTA outpunches its weight class in a lot of ways, and that's one of those ways. We knew that we had duplicative service in the city of Denton. What I mean by that is we had GoZone service operating over the fixed route. And when the board of directors chose to maintain service to connect 3, 6, and 7 that you see there, we had a situation where people were sometimes using the bus, or they would say, I like GoZone better, and they would use GoZone. That's paying for 2 services on one geography, and that's not cost efficient. So we said, what would happen if we made it so that if you're trying to operate inside, you're trying to take a trip inside that purple boundary during the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., the data told us there was a lot of trips that wanted to be had there. What if the GoZone service told you, hey, thank you for your ride request, but you need to go take the bus? And so we implemented that. We worked with our partners at VIA, we worked with our board of directors, we communicated to the public, and with the implementation of a 20-minute schedule that runs from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday, what we have seen is that Connect ridership is up 30% year over year. So what that tells us is where the bus is accessible and feasible and there's the density of demand, it is the most cost-effective mode that we can use and people will use it. But the reason that's important to the city of Lewisville is because by taking that GoZone capacity out of the city of Denton, we were able to redistribute those service hours to the cities of Lewisville and Highland Village. So what you see here, and again, this is kind of behind the numbers because this year to date, negative 2.7% GoZone ridership, you might look at that and say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look good. But if you look behind the numbers, you kind of double click into it, what you see is this is in August, September, October, November, December, fiscal year 2023, fiscal year 2024, year over year, ridership on GoZone in Denton is down. But then look at the graphs for Highland Village and Lewisville, year over year, ridership in those cities is up. Reducing ridership 12% in Denton drove 14% ridership growth in Lewisville and 25% ridership in Highland Village. We are now in the mode of optimizing our service. We ran it full out for a couple of years. We broke the all-time ridership record, and now we're figuring out how to balance the scale so we can move as many people as cost effectively as possible. And the great news is the system responds rationally. The data tells us things that we think can happen, and when we make those decisions, the right outcomes result. And a lot of people across the country and in the region are talking about using GoZone microtransit data to plan fixed routes. They're talking about it in theory. We're doing it in practice, and it's been really great to see. We are able to actively manage the capacity and monitor the performance of GoZone on a daily basis, and every week we produce more data that goes into this. Is a snapshot view of our dashboard. What we see is we've got a target deployment of service hours in Lewisville, and then which is 1,650 hours a week. We have our seat unavailability KPI set at 17.5%. We want to be less than that. And then we have our wait time set at 24 minutes, and we want to be less than that. And what you see here is we launched the ISP here in August. If I was to go backwards, you'd see these bars be a little bit shorter. But you see a little bit of a bumpy start as the algorithm for VIA wants to send those cars to Denton. We said, no, they're supposed to be in Lewisville. Let's bring them back down. And now we've been maintaining a pretty consistent cadence. Now there's times when drivers call off because they're not available or whatever, but we've maintained the hourly deployment we were after, and you can see that we've continued to meet the KPIs. So again, the system performs rationally and it performs exceptionally well. So what does all this mean in terms of ridership and service to the city of Lewisville? I showed you a version of this graph last year. In a tabular view, in 2019, you only had fixed route running. You had air transit and the train, but in terms of this service, you had fixed route, 122,000 trips. Fixed route transitioned out in 2022. You went to only GoZone. And this year, 4 months through the year, if you multiply that times 3, you'll be pushing 300,000 trips on GoZone for the year. So exceptional performance, proving that the GoZone service has been the right service for the city of Lewisville, and giving us the opportunity, frankly, now as we look at what our long-range plan is, we can start to see where are the hot spots in demand that might benefit from a fixed route at some point in the future. But if the board makes that decision, it'll be based on data. We completed this analysis because we've done something similar with the city of Highland Village. Lots of GO-Zone connectivity between the city of Lewisville and the city of Highland Village. The data shows us people traveling from all over Lewisville to get to the 407 corridor in Highland Village. We think it's likely to go to work, at least it's to go shopping. Similar sort of activity happening in Castle Hills as we work to make sure that we've got capacity available for all sides. It's interesting to see the spread of origins and destinations, but how they concentrate in Castle Hills right along the 121 corridor. Again, when we look for things that that tell us, is transit driving economic activity? I think this is a good indicator that it is. Switching gears a little bit to our paratransit service. This is fiscal 2020, and then we've got 23, 24, and 25. We've stayed consistent over the last several years with regard to paratransit service, and that's okay because paratransit is one of the most expensive modes that we operate. And if GO-Zone can provide people a level of independence that would otherwise be dependent upon paratransit, then we want to move those people by GO-Zone. And so the service remains viable, but it's not growing, but it's okay for all the reasons that I just said. And then where are those people going? Primarily medical, educational employments, special abilities in North Texas, DaVita Dialysis, and the Bluffs at Vista Ridge, so on and so forth. So moving our most vulnerable population is one of the things that is most important to us, and we're doing that in this way. And then finally, we'll talk about the TRIP program. Since the beginning of the TRIP program, it started in fiscal 21, you've had $19.2 million available to you, and you've obligated $14.7 million on these great transit and transportation supportive projects. You have this year $7.7 million available for the fiscal year 2025 call for projects, and our staffs are already working together to identify what those projects are so that we can have them awarded and obligated by our board of directors. The board recently at DCTA voted to extend the TRIP program into perpetuity, and so every year following fiscal 25 they'll have the opportunity in the budget cycle to look at what monies might be available and how those monies might be allocated to the TRIP program. And then lastly, one of the other things that our board has really been focused on is figuring out how we can cause more cities to participate in the services that DCTA provides, not just for the benefit of those cities, but also so that our DCTA member cities can get to more places and the residents there can get to more places. We've worked on this thing called the New Member City and Contracted Services Program, and when we set a policy like this, we want to ask the question, what is the reason that we do it? We want to generate a funding source that has value that is greater than the cost of service. We want to increase access to residents of Denton County and our member cities, and we need to understand what resources are required in order to deliver that service. And so when we think about membership, we think about dedicated funding source over the long term, but we can rework our contracted services approach to really be clear at the outset when we go into an engagement with a new city that we're going to do this for some time under a contracted services arrangement so that we can both figure out what this means for you and what this means for us. But ultimately, we are looking for this to be some long-term engagement that's beneficial, not just for that city, but for the city that has invested so much into DCTA to see it successful. So with that, I will just conclude by saying we appreciate the support that we've gotten from, obviously, the city of Lewisville, our chair, all the members of our board. We've worked really hard as a team, staff, board, stakeholders, everybody, to deliver these kinds of results in the last couple of years, and we look forward to what's coming next, specifically on the A-Train corridor, and now this optimization of our service.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So going to GO-Zone, so I use GO-Zone a bit, and I've noted like the last time I used this about 10 in the morning. Mm-hmm. Usually before it's been like, I guess, prime time when people are moving. And I think at this spot is where Max Machines is. Mm-hmm. Like I could not get a ride. So I had to walk to the station. More steps, not a big deal. Mm-hmm. The thing that was weird to me though was I had to pick up at the A-Train station at the Old Town Station, mm-hmm. and I had to walk like around to church to actually, for the pickup spot. which is strange, you know. I'm like, I understand you don't pick up in front of a house, but it seems like that would be an optimal spot for pickup.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a universe of virtual stops inside the GoZone app. So let us take a minute to look at the virtual stops around the Old Town Station to make sure they're active and viable.
Because I was like, where am I going? But
Yeah, no, that's good feedback. And we've gotten other feedback that says it wants me to walk someplace that doesn't feel safe or something like that. One of the things we need to do in our long-range service plan is kind of evaluate the entirety of all the virtual stops and figure if we can set some parameters around what are things we're willing to accept and what are things we're not willing to accept. So thank you for that note.
I have a quick question about slide 12. So I'm struck by this. So the dark line at the top, the start off at 2000 drop down for fiscal year 20. Is that a COVID?
Yes, so this would have been the COVID year, fiscal 2020.
So any thoughts on why the other metrics seem to be going up and recovering from COVID, but this seems to be staying flat?
We were talking about this in Austin, as a matter of fact. I think with regard to the senior population, there may be a group of people who were using the service here that no longer need the services. We have worked to give them opportunities to use GoZone where they're allowed. But you're right. In Highland Village, for instance, the line is beginning to creep up as we get more phone calls and get people engaged. But I don't have a good answer for you.
I was just curious. I don't know if anything could or couldn't do, but other places that seem to recover, this demographic seems to not embrace recovery.
I think there's two drivers there, just my mindset. One is this is a very health compromised population, both seniors and disabled. And so when COVID's still around and still impacts those folks. So many have chosen not to come back out into society because of the risk factors. The other is, Paul said it very euphemistically, they no longer have a need for the service.
Yeah,
because,
I picked up on that. Yes.
Yeah. So that may be another driver. Now, again, that's anecdotal, but I think that matches a lot of the data sets that we deal with.
Okay.
What's the viability of Sunday service?
On which?
A train.
So I think if we want to spend the operating budget on Sunday service, that certainly is an option. We currently use Sundays to do most of our track maintenance and signal maintenance and all that sort of stuff. One of the things that we'll have the opportunity to do in the A-Train enhancement program is to look at what is the cost of running the train even more frequently, because every additional train that you run down the corridor costs more money, and so the board needs the ability to understand, okay, well, what does it cost? What does 15-minute frequency cost if I did it during the peak hours? What if it costs if I do it all day? What does it cost if I improve Saturday service to 30 minutes instead of an hour? What does it cost if we put 1 hour service on Sundays instead of what we have today is nothing? So it's very feasible. It's just a matter of budget. And that's part of the conversation we'll be having through the enhancement program, as well as late operating hours. So if you're going to meet the train, if you're going to meet the last train out of DFW Airport on the Silver Line, which is going to be 1 o'clock in the morning, then that means the last train out of downtown Carrollton on the A train needs to be leaving at about 1:45. You know that we don't run that late today. In order for us to run that late, we need to figure out a different positive train control solution, because that's when the Dallas, Garland, and Northern is switching freight. So we need to have interoperability there. And so there's some complexities to the extended hours and cost, as well as on Sunday service. And I have not forgotten about running later. That answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Anything else for Paul? I'm incredibly proud of what this organization has been able to do. I mean, we're hitting the boxes at national level. We're hitting the boxes locally. One thing that Paul didn't brag on, and I'm going to, is that the metrics that we use to determine cost for each of our modalities, whether that's GoZone or the buses, that was actually picked up by a couple of national transit studies, and they're taking that, what we did as a really manual spreadsheet, and they're turning that into a piece of software. So other agencies can compute their costs. And I think that's amazing, you know, that our little agency has come up with something that could, you know, take the guesswork out of which modality makes the most sense where.
Yes.
So super powerful stuff that's coming out of this Denton County crew. There's no other questions or comments. Paul, thank you for the time.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. You'll have a great night.
You too, sir. Next up, discussion on economic outlook, trends, demographics, and budget insights. We have our Director of Finance, Mr. Dave Erb, our Budget Manager, Ashley Carlisle, and Economic Development, Christina Williams, presenting. And this is picking up the item from our retreat that we had to postpone.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to be here to present the missing piece of the retreat from a couple weeks ago, and fortunately for the directors, they get to see what they were going to miss a couple weeks ago. Originally, this presentation was going to be provided at the retreat, and there was actually 48 slides, I believe, where we've narrowed it down to 30 just for sake of time. So a little bit more detail is provided in that information that we handed out earlier, but I think we're going to be able to get through it a little bit more concise, quickly, and provide opportunities for questions. So we did put together this economic outlook to provide some various economic indicators, demographics, and budgetary and financial information to help put some context into the upcoming budget discussions. This is my preface to the rest of the presentation. If you've been tuned in to any of the news nationally, you know that there's a few things going on. I looked, and up to now, there's been 76 executive orders that were put in place since President Trump took over presidency. I'm not making any political statements. I'm just saying that there's a number of policies and executive orders that went in place with the intention to spur the economy. But there's some fears out there that they could cause some inflation. So, and we're seeing some indicators out there that could be causing that. So some of the executive orders that have been put in place deal with regulatory changes affecting businesses. We've got tax policies that are there, and also trade agreements and tariffs that are going to have an impact. And I think you're seeing some anecdotal and probably some real information, data coming back on those. As it relates to inflation impacts and then resulting interest rate impacts from the Federal Reserve, there's a future expectation change for inflation where as late as last September wasn't there. So dealing with that. And all this leads to how is it going to impact the city of Lewisville. We've got price volatility dealing with, as a result of the tariffs, and then consumer sentiment, where there was some consumer sentiment right after the elections into December, and then it's been going down since then. There's a lot of fears out there with inflation and all. And then the employment market trends. The city's been able to overcome a lot of those issues with tight markets and the number of jobs that are available versus the folks that are there to fill them. We had that comprehensive pay study that was done and all those elements that were implemented. We also have a GALP program that we're using to increase engagement for the city. I think the HR team overall has just done a real nice job in bringing down turnover rates and just filling vacancies in the city. So those are some of the comments that kind of preface the rest of our comments here. What I did is I put down some interest rates, inflation, and employer information, and what's going on in the market and how it's impacting the city and how we're responding to it. So as far as interest rates, again, as of late as September last year, the Fed had considered having 4 rate cuts over the year. Since that time, they've revised that to 2 rates cut possibly for the second half of the year. There are some fears that there's some inflation that's still there. As of last month, it was at 3%. So that's still above that benchmark 2% that the Fed would like to see. So how does that impact the city? Now, we don't do a lot of borrowing except as it relates to our bonds. We do a bond sale for revenue and GO bonds every year. So obviously, if those rates aren't coming down, we're still going to see some rates that we've typically seen in the past. Last year's issues were about 3.4% for both the GO and the revenue bonds. We were hoping that maybe there'd be some cuts so that would bring that cost of borrowing down. Talking with Jason Hughes from Hilltop, we're using about a 4% estimate cost of borrowing for the upcoming sale bonds this year. Regarding inflation, it's interesting, did some analysis, and I think some of the charts are in the original where you've got the Dallas, Fort Worth, and the national trends pretty much following the same track. Inflation is a little bit higher, and you'll see that for employment as well because of the supply and demand. Obviously, the rate that DFW area is growing, supply of, or the availability of materials is causing inflation to go a little bit higher, especially as it relates to construction and inflation. You saw from the presentation that was done during the retreat that talks about the reset of the cost for certain construction items. So we've got that reset that really increased the cost of supplies. And then we've got inflation moving forward of those about 4 to 5%. So we had two things. We had the reset in the rates or the cost of supplies, and then we've got inflation moving forward. How does that impact the city? Well, we've had to be creative with how we're managing our budget, looking for efficiency gains through our operating budget, and then on the capital side, obviously we've done things the way we purchase the projects, or we bid them out, and we also have project management professionals like PPV that help us manage the budget and look for cost savings wherever we can on that. And then on the employment side, job creation for Texas and nationwide continues to be higher than expected. It is slowing down right now, but there's a lot of uncertainty related to companies that have recently announced layoffs, like Starbucks, Southwest, Microsoft, some larger Fortune 500 companies. Also with uncertainty with the federal level layoffs that can contribute to that. So, you know, I mentioned earlier some of the things that the city has done to address the impacts to recruitment, either the tight labor market, which we had been up to this point, and I'm not quite sure where that's going, but I think we're positioned real well to address that area of our operations. I'll turn it over to Christine to handle some of the trends in retail, office, and some other areas here.
Yes, so just as a reminder, we pulled this information from CoStar. We use CoStar, which is a platform that we can not only track what the vacancies and availabilities are for our buildings and vacant land in Lewisville, but they also have these reports on trends as far as vacancy rates, occupancy rates, construction deliveries. Just a note, there wasn't too much of a significant difference between 2023 and 2024, but just a couple of highlights from multifamily office space. With multifamily, vacancy in Lewisville stabilized over the last year. Throughout 2024, we still saw kind of the ebb and flow of the daily asking rent per square foot, the rent declining towards the end of the year, and that is due just to the sheer volume of the units delivered in the market. And so you kind of see that imbalance a little bit across DFW. Our CoStar rep was mentioning that there was a little bit of imbalance as far as supply versus demand, but they anticipate that the construction levels will pick up through mid-2025 and increasing again in 2026. For the office space, we added a little bit more square footage just for our inventory of office space. 2024 was consistent with 2023 as far as the construction and the occupancy rate that was at 79.12% for 2024. And we see that same trend as we go into the future years. Another note that our CoStar rep had mentioned, as far as office space for the funding, it was a little bit different for office developers. It was a little bit more stalled if the office developer did not have a tenant lined up. So that was kind of something that we'll watch for as we kind of go through the trend for office space. Industrial space still seems to be one of our stronger submarkets. The first half of 2024, where we see strong tenant demand, and also just showing our vacancy rate staying below the market average at 6.5%. The occupancy rate in 2024 was 95.5%, and we still see that kind of consistent occupancy rate through 2026 and beyond. The chart on the side here is something that we've also put in last year just to kind of show where we are in line with the surrounding cities. We're right in the middle as far as our total square footage of industrial space and what that percentage is of the total land area used for industrial. So last year and this year we did rank 9 out of the 18 cities that was shown. And then retail trends. This is also another submarket where we show that consistency year to year. We show the occupancy rate remaining at 93%, and then also still see that for the coming years. Last year we saw that 63,000 square feet of space was delivered for the retail industry, and this is kind of just a snapshot of what that submarket looks like. Not only does it include Lewisville, but also some of the surrounding cities. That's just how CoStar kind of puts their submarkets. Moving on to some demographics, we kind of took some snapshots. What we use in our department is Esri, our GIS business analyst, which pulls data from the U.S. Census Bureau as well as the American Community Survey. So we see an increase in the median household income, the per capita income, and median net worth from last year. But we do still see that the annual spending per household, the top two are the healthcare and the entertainment industries. And then you can kind of see the population and daytime population here, which we did ask the population from James, and he got that from the COG. The COG is showing a little bit higher at 137,315 for our overall population. But for our daytime population that we still pull from Esri, that is about 6,400 as an increase from last year that we've seen it. So just to kind of give a snapshot of what that looks like for our daytime population, and then of course the transportation to work, the majority of it being by car, carpool, and then public transportation. And then just to show what our employment looks like for Lewisville, we are primarily white-collar employment area with the top three labor force categories as management, office, and sales. So that just kind of coincides with both of these charts here.
Thank you. So the next few slides are just going to cover our property tax values, total assessed value, and single family values. Some of this information you've already seen previously. Last year when we did retreat, it was a little bit later in the year, and we were able to get some preliminary numbers from the appraisal district. We had the retreat a little bit earlier, so we don't have that information, but I just want to kind of point out a few things here. On the table on the left-hand side shows the tax year 2020 to 2024, and it shows the growth in the taxable assessed value. And you can see we started in 2020 with $11.7 billion, and by the time 2024 came, we're at $19.4 billion. That is a 65% increase over that 5-year period. Of course, a lot of that is attributable to the Castle Hills annexation. Prior to that, we had a slowdown a little bit, the 5% in 2020 and the 3% in 2021. Again, COVID, the appraisal district was very mindful about making any changes. A lot of slowdown in the economy and the housing there before that. And then right after the annexation, that first year, the assessed value growth of 11.5%. A lot of that was being driven by the increased property values. We had that big surge in 2023. In 2024, when we saw some growth, a little bit more modest, 2.5%. We did see the same strong growth in the single-family values, but it was tempered a little bit by slower growth in commercial and business personal property. The 3 years prior to 2020, the city averaged about 9% growth year over year. And going back to 2018, the city's assessed value doubled. That's pretty remarkable for a community of any size to have doubled their assessed value and to be at just about 20 billion. And I expect that to grow even further for 2025. The table on the right is some of that's driving that growth. That's the new value that's hitting the ground that hadn't been there previously. The last 2 years, you can see it spiked $720 million and $780 million. Prior to that, we averaged about $250 million a year. And then Christina's going to go over some slides in a couple here that show all the different development projects that are currently either completed or breaking ground or in progress that are going to continue to add to that new growth that we have year over year. Now, last year when I made some statements about new growth, that was before we got the $780 million. I thought it was going to come in something a little bit less because I wasn't as optimistic. I'm hesitant to kind of make any calls this year because with what economic development is doing, it's pretty remarkable. Plus, once they go through all the projects, you'll see that we could see some significant growth again in 25 and in future years just by what we've got planned. So we also wanted to show single-family assessed value growth. Single-family accounts for about 46% of the total assessed value, so their largest share. And just wanted to show how single-family values grow, so do the total values of the city. This table, which we modified this year to include median values, in the past we would just show average value growth, which tends to skew the total when you include some outliers and some of the larger value properties that are now part of the city with Castle Hills. So Councilman Kelly talked about median. We're very aware of that, and you can see just the differences in growth from year over year. The average growth from the previous year was 10.11%, while the median value only grew 5.63. So that's a little bit more appropriate to what we're seeing overall throughout the city. As we get more data built into this table, we'll include that in the charts as well. But just a couple things, our feelings for growth is we're going to continue to see growth through escalated values. I think home values are going to continue to grow, although at a slower value. Plus the assessed values, which shows the taxable value, they're still playing catch up with the market values. So where for a couple of years you might have seen a value of a home go up 30% in a single year, the assessed value is only allowed to go up through caps 10%. So you can see we're still trying to play catch up with that. Long term, though, we expect the assessed value increases for single-family homes to be about 4-6%. Christina's going to talk about some of the projects that we've got going on.
So I'm sure y'all are all familiar with all of our projects here, but this is kind of just a summary of some of the ones that have just recently completed, and then those that are under construction. So what I've kind of done is just show the capital investment, the minimum capital investment for each of the projects. So just for all of these 5 projects on here, the total anticipated investment is over $254 million, with the number of units at 1,161. So a lot of investment, a lot of units that are coming into Old Town, and just able to see that, and then as we kind of continue with development to add more investment to that as well. And then some of the projects that are just across Lewisville, Heritage Trails and Towers up in our Lake District Northern Gateway, as well as Lakeside Crossing, a couple of our commercial projects with Bison Grove and Wells Fargo, and then of course Crown Center. With all of just these 6 right here, anticipated over $693 million in investment. So definitely a good snapshot of what we can kind of see over the year and then the coming years, and see that investment play out.
I think also on that is the shocking number on Wells Fargo of how much that capital investment is in a data center compared to the others.
Yes.
Well, definitely one of our larger projects, for sure.
Okay, one last slide from me before I turn it over to Ashley. Just a recap of our bond ratings. We were most recently rated from Standard & Poor's and Fitch in August of 2024. A community our size that issues the amount of debt that we do typically will require having two different rating agencies opine on your finances. So we do that. We've had S&P and Fitch for a number of years now. Revenue bonds by S&P and Fitch were rated AAA, while on the general obligation side, S&P rated the city AAA, while Fitch had AA+. Now, that reflects a downgrade, and I just want to caution you that it's nothing that we've done to make that change. In the very first line of their report, they say that the ratings change was solely due to the changes in criteria that they're using to evaluate municipal governments. So I just thought it was interesting that they were acknowledging that they were lowering our rating right up front. And no amount of convincing would take them off of that. I mean, I thought it was real interesting. An earlier slide that Christina talked about was the types of jobs that we have in the city and how predominantly they are white collar. And one of the things that we got dinged on from our rating agency, Fitch, was because of our education level. Well, you know, we tried to get them to take into consideration our daytime population and the people that we're bringing in and the types of jobs that we had, but to no avail. So we'll continue to pound that every time we have that. It's unfortunate that that happened, but again, it was nothing that we're doing differently. We're strong, as strong financially as ever. Some of the drivers, some of the comments that S&P had for us reflecting the AAA is solid finances and maintenance of solid reserves. You know, that's something that's preached regularly from Gina and the budget team, is just the level of reserves and how much we have in excess of that 20% level, and how we have capacity to do one-time fundings and those kind of things like you're considering with the OPEB. We have that just because of the way that the finances are managed. We also have strong financial management policies, which pretty much guides everything that gets done at that level. Fitch also had some kind things to say to us about we've got high revenue and expenditure control. That just means the budget does a real nice job of managing the revenues and projecting those. And on the expenditure side, departments are consistently under budget when it comes to their annual budget. They're not racing to spend it at the end of the year, so they're recognizing that. And then basically strong population trend with the growth that we have with that, and I think we're going to see more of that with all the housing developments that are going in. And the size of our community now is able to generate just ongoing growth. These ratings are key in determining what that cost of borrowing is. I had mentioned earlier that from 2024, the rates that we had on the GEO and the revenue bonds were about 3.4%. We're projecting 4% for this year's issues, knowing Jason and how he feels for the market. I'm sure it's going to probably come in something a little bit less than that. So I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Ashley.
So just to tack on to a little bit about what Dave was saying right there about that interest rate, with our blue ribbon projects, we used a higher inflation rate. I want to say it was around 9% for those projects, and then we anticipated the years that they were going to hit. So we did anticipate that occurring. This is just a summary of those bond projects. We presented this to you last year. There was a bond election in May 2024. Total 4 propositions for $263.4 million. All of those propositions passed with overwhelming support. We've already issued basically our year 1 projects in fiscal year 2024. That was a little over $25 million. Just got a short summary for you here. I will say this totals about 9 projects, I believe, out of a total of 24 or so that we've already issued funding for. The largest one being the animal shelter expansion, which Council, you just saw that on an agenda recently where you approved 2 agreements for that. That was about 9.9 million of that 25.5. So again, a variety of projects. We have streets, we have land acquisition for Fire Station 4, trail development, and then dispersed in between some of those projects is funding for public art as well. So now we're going to talk about some budgetary insights. Normally when I present this information to you, we're looking at more revenues than what I'm going to present today, but just in the interest of time and what you really need to know when it comes time to determining our budget calendar, we're just going to talk about general fund revenues for the most part. So what you see here is our sales tax in the general fund. Normally when I show you this slide, I'm just showing you the past 5 years or so, but I wanted to extend this out this time because what we're seeing is, while we are seeing increases year over year, we saw a large jump in FY 2021 correlated with Castle Hills. We are starting to see somewhat of a flattening of that trend. We are still seeing an increase year after year, but I just wanted to point this out. If you look at this chart in the bottom corner here, and I apologize, I know it's small, what I want to point out here is that's our percentage change from year over year. So if we look back in fiscal year 2015, we're in the 5, 6, 7%, somewhere around that range. Then we see that huge spike that's related to Castle Hills. And since then, we've seen that drop off. So now we're in the 1%, a little less than 1% range. So just want to keep that in mind going into budget season. Some of the things that we're seeing if we're comparing fiscal year 24 to previous years, again, we did see that increase. We came in about $435,000 more than the prior year. One thing that we also keep aware of is we have a sales tax consultant, HDL, that we work with frequently, and so we're aware of any corrective action cases that they might be working on with the Texas Comptroller's Office that could essentially be audited and could potentially bring in more revenue to the city. And I'm not going to go over all the detail on this slide. You have seen this information multiple times related to a proposed rule change by the Texas Comptroller's Office. Essentially, there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out here, and this is related to the recent litigation. When we last talked about this, this was in August of 2024. There was a trial date for October 2024. That trial did occur in October. And then we found out in December 2024 that a decision was issued. Essentially, it ruled in favor of the Castle Group, meaning that the Comptroller's Office is permanently enjoined from enforcing those potential rule changes. One thing that we found out is that there was a little bit of ambiguity in that ruling, and so both the Texas Comptroller's Office and the Castle Group have issued a request for clarification through what's called a motion to modify. And at the time, we expected to have an answer by the end of last calendar year. We have not received any information on that yet. So we wanted to provide you with a brief update here, but as I think it was Gina that mentioned during retreat, this is not as much of a concern for us anymore. We've stopped taking it into consideration with our budget. We want to make sure that we're putting those funds to good use.
There's no legislation right now that I'm aware of that seems to be taking us back to the legislative side, right?
We are not aware of it.
Yeah.
And Brandy's
On top of it.
on top of that.
Absolutely.
So the next up is building permits here. Building permit revenue is based on actual projects that we're aware that are occurring, so not necessarily trend-based. A couple of things I wanted to point out here when we're looking at fiscal year 2024 is we ended the year at about $119,000 less than the prior year. You may recall last year when we gave our mid-year report, we did lower those projections. We thought there might be a couple of big projects that weren't going to hit. We ended up coming in above that budget. And then if you look at our fiscal year 25 year to date, we're already close to $800,000 in revenue. We had one large project that hit that consists for about half of that. We do have a couple other large projects, in particular Lakeside Crossing multifamily and townhomes that we're monitoring to see if that will occur this year. And then Valley Parkway Business Park, that was the big project that has already hit our revenues. And then, yes, like I mentioned, as of late February, we're already close to our budget, which is $1 million. Moving on to hotel tax revenue. So this is the one section that's not general fund related, but I did just want to mention it here. What we're seeing here is that last year's actuals came in just barely under the prior year, so we didn't really see a major change there. But we are seeing somewhat of a drop in our occupancy rates, and I'll talk about that in just a second. One thing I also wanted to mention here is that late last fiscal year, we started collecting this tax on our short-term rentals. We only had a couple of months in fiscal year 24, it was a little less than $8,000 collected, but as of late February, This year, we've collected about $40,000 in that revenue that we were not collecting previously. So let's talk a little bit about hotel occupancy rates. You've seen this chart many, many times. I always like to point out, okay, here's our drop with COVID, right? We bounced back up, we were pretty stable. However, in calendar year 2024, we started to see somewhat of a decrease. We saw it month after month. And when we dug into the details, we found out that the total number of room nights increased. And what that means is there's only a certain number of rooms available at every hotel, right? But as more hotels come online, for example, True by Hilton, it increases those total number of room nights. So we did see that happen. We saw about 11,000 more room nights last year. We also saw a decrease in our demand. So about 23,000 room nights were not booked last year compared to the prior year. So those two factors, when you put them together, that's why we're seeing this decrease in our occupancy rates here. And James has reached out to the hotel industry, reached out to some of our other neighboring cities as well. We're not the only ones seeing this decrease in demand. We're seeing less leisure travel, less conference bookings, some things along those lines. People are less likely to spend that extra money that they have in their pocket. So this is definitely something that we're going to be keeping an eye on. But as I mentioned on the previous slide, our revenues didn't really take a huge hit, and that's because there's other factors that go into that as well. So the next few slides are going to talk a little bit about federal funding. I'm not necessarily going to go through every single one of these line by line, but as Dave alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, you've probably heard some things in the news. We just want to relay that we are aware of all of this. We have plans in the background. We did want to present council with all of our federally funded projects that are reimbursement projects. So what this means is if we got money on the front end, you're not seeing it here. For example, ARPA, that was $19.5 million. We got that money up front. It's not something that we're concerned about. But what you're seeing here is mostly federal grants or potential state projects that are pass-through projects, and then some other federally funded projects as well. Before I go through all of these, I wanted to mention that as of the end of February, we have heard about one grant agreement. That was our Safe Streets for All grant that has been suspended. Council, you had not yet seen that executed agreement. We were still in the works of getting that put together. And then we've also heard on 2 community forestry grants as well. Work had already started on those grants, so what we're doing is we're shifting capital dollars. We're going to finish those projects out. They were smaller projects, but we also heard that those grants have been suspended as well.
Just if you staff could keep a running tally of that, we need to be able to tell our legislators that this is the dollar impacts to our cities of this whatever nonsense is going on.
Absolutely. So what you see here, just on this first slide here, we've got a couple of engineering projects, mostly infrastructure projects. Obviously, our infrastructure projects are incredibly important, so we have options there if we need to potentially look at some of these projects in a future year through an action step, or if we can shift capital dollars. We have bond funding as well that we can shift. We have options for these projects. Then you see a fire grant down at the bottom for our outdoor warning sirens. That is through the Department of Homeland Security. And now on this slide, you see ITS. This grant agreement actually just came to council in the last few months as well. That was for a network access control project that we have yet to spend funding on. And again, all of these are reimbursement grants, meaning that we spend the money first and then we ask for that reimbursement afterwards. And then the large bulk of this slide is our CDBG programs and our home program. I wanted to mention home specifically because you heard about it at council. There was a presentation on affordable housing. And so this is something that we're aware of. And again, we're always considering our options, but we do want to make sure that you're aware of this in case we end up hearing anything on this program. We might need to come back to council and talk about what we want to do with affordable housing here. Then, actually, one thing I also wanted to mention here is that I was on a call earlier today with the Government Finance Officers Association, and they asked all of the cities that were on the call if anyone had had any impacts to their CDBG reimbursements as of yet, and the answer was no, including us. We just recently put in a reimbursement request and had no issues with that up to this point. And then we've got a couple of parks projects as well. Up here at the top, that's the community forestry grants. Those are those 2 grants that I mentioned earlier. And I think Stacy alluded to them in her presentation at retreat as well. So again, we have already started that work. We're going to continue it, and we will just fund it with capital dollars that we have available. Those are small grants, not as big of an impact to us, so we'll continue moving forward. And then we have a few police grants as well, 2 justice assistance grants, and I believe maybe another one is coming through soon as well. And then the cops hiring program. So what this one is basically we receive $125,000 a year to help fund the salaries and benefits for 3 police officers. Doesn't cover everything. We did budget this in your base budget as well. This just provides us those extra savings. So over the course of those 3 years, you're looking at $325,000. And then lastly, we have an energy efficiency and conservation block grant that's being managed through the city manager's office. This is for our fleet, so looking to purchase hybrid or electric vehicles. I did hear on this one earlier today, not specifically for the city of Lewisville, but other entities are seeing additional reviews on the reimbursement requests for that particular grant. So then moving into the final part of today's presentation, we always bring the budget calendar discussion to council and we present to you with 2 options. The reason that we do this is because the budget calendar is based on state law, so there are a lot of deadlines that we have to meet in a very short time frame. And also, if council decides to pursue a property tax that is above what's called the voter approval rate, there has to be an election called. So what you see here is the option for no election. This is essentially almost the exact same calendar we used last year, with the exception of maybe a day or 2 difference. So all throughout July, the city manager's office and finance were preparing that preliminary budget. We received certified tax rolls on July 25th, no matter which option, that's going to be the date we get those. Then on August 4th, that's a regular session for city council. We'll provide you with that budget. Then we'll have our typical one-on-one meetings leading up to budget workshop, which would be Saturday, August 9th. That's usually always a special session, so that's going to be on a Saturday. Then towards the end of August, we'll publish our notice of public hearing. And then moving into September, we have 2 regularly scheduled meetings on September 8th and September 15th. On that September 8th meeting, that's where we will have the public hearing and the vote on the budget. And then September 15th will be the public hearing and the vote on the tax rate. One thing I want to mention here is that state law says that we cannot have the public hearing on the budget on the same day as the vote on the tax rate. So that's why you see us split it up like that. And then this is the option if we were to pursue an election. So as you can see, everything shifts up this way. On July 14th, this would be something where we would have to call a special session in order to present you with that preliminary budget. That would be before we get our certified tax rolls on July 25th. So a lot of uncertainty around there, although we do receive preliminary information from the appraisal districts that we would take into account. Then we would have our one-on-one meetings with city council members. Budget workshop would shift up a week, so it would still be a special session, but it would be on Saturday, August 2nd instead. And then that same weekend that we have workshop, we would actually have to contact the paper in order to start that process for our public hearings as well. So we would be doing that the same weekend. Moving into August 13th, we publish officially the notice of public hearing on the tax rate. August 15th, we would have a special session for the public hearing and vote on the budget. And again, we can't hold that public hearing on the same day as the vote on the tax rate. So that's why you see that difference there. And then that August 18th date I wanted to mention for a couple of reasons. So this is when we have the public hearing scheduled and the vote on the tax rate. This is the last day legally that we can vote on this. And also, if council were to call for an election, this is the last day that you can do that as well. So it's important for a couple of reasons there. So to just sum it up, this is our recommendation. As Dave mentioned earlier, we are expecting to see continued increase in our property tax revenue. We're also expecting most of our other major revenue sources to increase as well, with that caveat on sales tax. We're seeing somewhat of a slowing there, but still year over year, we expect that to increase. And then just like usual, we're going to continue to monitor those inflation rates, our interest rates, see how that impacts our borrowing power. We'll keep tracking building permits, sales tax, those occupancy rates, as well as any changes in federal funding, which is, it's something changes every week right now. So it's definitely something that we'll be keeping a tally on. And then we do this every year. We wanted to mention it here, but we always review our fees and our charges for services. We just want to make sure that we're recovering the costs that it takes to provide that provide that service. So this is definitely something that we will continue to place an emphasis on this year as well. So based on everything that you have seen in this presentation, staff's recommendation is to proceed without the option of an election for fiscal year 2026.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, we got about 4 minutes available for questions and answers.
Can we jump back to slide 7 real quick? I'll take one of those. This is by far my favorite slide. Every time I see this, I get excited because, you know, to hear some folks talk, we are the warehouse capital of the world. I've heard that said a couple times. We're right in the sweet spot. We're right where we should be. So I'm excited to see this slide. And then the other thing I hear a lot about is all these warehouses that are boarded up and nobody's, just say we have 95% occupancy rate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, I love this. I try some portion of this to kind of slide out quite a bit when I talk to folks about that. But I just wanted to bring that up to everybody's attention. Everybody's listening. I think we're right where we should be for warehouses right now.
And Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were almost in the exact same position as last year, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Patrick, I had a similar thought about our retail space as well. Because I have heard some chatter about people saying that our retail is empty as well. Where is it? We have our retail occupancy is at 93%. Mm-hmm. That's very strong.
Yeah, that's very strong.
Yeah, I pulled several of these data points out when I mentioned state of the cities. So I appreciate staff's input on that. And yeah, it's just factually wrong, some of the comments that you see on the internet.
Shocking.
Yeah, hard to believe. So, you know, the great thing is we have them right here, and I appreciate that. So, any other questions or comments? All right, folks, we are going to go into recess, and we'll resume back in regular session here at 7 p.m. Good evening. We're going to call this regular session of the Lewisville City Council to order. It is 7 p.m. and we do have a quorum. First up on tonight's agenda, we have the invocation with our Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, Ronnie Cade.
Fathers, we come together tonight as one body. Please give us a discernment over the items before us. I ask you to bring forth a renewed sense of community for our city and a hedge of protection over our citizens and staff. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledges to our flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. All right. First up on tonight's agenda is a presentation. And if I could have the library team please come forward for this presentation of the 2024 Achievement of Excellence in Libraries Award from the Texas Municipal Library Directors Association. For y'all, some background: to qualify for the Achievement of Excellence in Libraries, the Lewisville Library demonstrated excellence in all 10 required categories. Many thanks to my library team, our library team members who are innovative, and their service make our library possible. It is an amazing space.
Thank you so much, Mayor, Council, and thank you all of you for the support of libraries. We're here today to give you the Achievement of Excellence in Libraries Award, which 10 categories are required for the application. I wanted to share a few of those examples with you of excellence at the library. The first category under new and enhanced services was our online library card application process. And the library staff worked diligently to prepare and launch that program. In the 6 months since the launch, there have been 809 library cards made online, which constitutes about 31% of library cards made during that time period. Second category is in collaborative efforts. The library collaborated with ITS, the municipal court, and some jail staff to work on maps of the library and the municipal annex to make it easier for our residents and library patrons to navigate our complex. So we have kiosks out in the library and around the annex for people to use those maps, and they're also on our website. The final example of excellence is in marketing, and the library changed and rebranded our from summer reading program to Destination Summer this last summer. So this new brand, new logo, recognizable name for the program are going to be our consistent theme. We're really excited about what that's going to do for the recognition of our patrons. And library programming is excellent. We're a great place to come and learn. And exciting and fun programs, more than just books and reading, so we're excited about that Destination Summer theme. So thank you for celebrating the Achievement of Excellence in Libraries Award with us, and I shared this with the whole community. Thank you very much.
If you didn't
This
have
is Kelly Brulard, our Library Services Manager, and Carissa Stewart, our Technical Services Supervisor, who are both instrumental in the application and in running and preparing for many of these programs.
Awesome. And if you didn't get a chance, the person presenting was Carolyn Booker, of course, our director of the library. There was a wonderful quick article done, I think, in the Lewisville Leader here about a week and a half ago. So if you get a chance, you want to read a little bit more about what's going on in the library, check that one out. It's amazing. I have my new purple card, by the way. I'm very excited. All right. Next up, public hearing. Public hearing item D1, consideration on ordinance amending Volume 2 of the Lewisville City Code, known as the Unified Development Code, by amending Article 3, Development and Zoning Procedures, Chapter 5, Plats, by granting the planning director the authority to approve with conditions or disapprove plats. This amendment moves all plat approval authority to staff in the Unified Development Code. Plat decisions by staff may be appealed to the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately to the City Council. This amendment is expected to result in efficiencies for both developers and city staff. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended unanimous approval 6-0 on February 4th, 2025, and it is recommended that the City Council approve the ordinances set forth in the caption above. I do have Mr. Richard Lutke, our Planning Director, available for questions, and the public hearing is now open. Council, I don't have any comments or questions for this one, so if there are no comments from council, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes unanimously 6-0. Council, I'll entertain a motion on the ordinance.
Move to approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. City Attorney.
This is an ordinance of the Lewisville City Council amending Article 3 Development and Zoning Procedures of Volume 2 of the Lewisville City Code, known as the Unified Development Code, by amending Chapter 3.1 Review and Decision-Making Bodies and Chapter 3.5 Plats to delegate to the Planning Director the authority to approve with conditions, or disapprove plats, to set forth a process to appeal the disapproval of a plat, and to clarify certain requirements of the platting process, providing for savings, repealer, severability, a penalty, and an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item E, Visitors Forum. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. I do not have any comments for the Visitors Forum at this time, so we'll go ahead and move on to item F, which is the consent agenda. All of the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a member of the public so requests. For a member of the public to request removal of an item, a speaker card or any comment must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. I have no requests for pulling anything from the consent agenda. So council, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item G, regular hearing 4. Consideration of 2 alternative standards associated with outdoor storage standards and screening standards for Walmart on 18.613 acres located at 801 West Main Street, legally described as Valley Ridge Business Park West Edition, Lot 3-R1-A, Block C, Zone General Business District, as requested by Ian Bright of Wing LLC on behalf of the owner, Walmart Real Estate Business Trust, 24-11-15-ALT-STD. Wing was originally granted the following 2 alternative standards for temporary drone delivery service at this location in the fall of 2023. A, to allow outside storage to be located in front of the principal building, and B, to allow a black galvanized metal fence in lieu of the required masonry wall or tubular steel fence. Wing reapplied prior to those alternative standards expiring with a desire to extend them. In addition, Wing has since been working with staff on supplemental standards for unmanned aircraft systems. Staff expects to bring the draft language before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council within the next 2 months. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended unanimous approval 5-0 on February 18th, 2025, and it is recommended that the City Council approve the 2 alternative standards as set forth in the caption above. Richard Ludke, our Planning Director, is available, and we also have Ryan Trimble and Catherine Lovett available to give a brief presentation, I believe. So now's your chance.
Lovett. I am with Wing Aviation. I'm the local policy and community affairs manager. I am based in Dallas, Texas, so not too far down the road from you all. I'm here today to introduce you all or reintroduce you all to Wing and answer any questions that you may have. I also have, sorry. Again, Catherine Lovett, local policy and community affairs manager with Wing, for those that may not have heard me. I'm here today to talk to you all about Wing Aviation, answer any questions that you all have. We also have Bernice here from Kimley Horn for any of the engineering related or site plan specific questions. And then Ryan is here today representing the Walmart team as well. So just to dive in and again, kind of refresh about Walmart and Wing's partnership. We've been working with Walmart here in the DFW Metroplex, as you know, to partner on their innovation hub to expand drone delivery to about 75% of the residents around the entire Metroplex. Since our partnership launched with Lewisville, we've now expanded to 19 cities here in the DFW area. So all the way up to Denton, down to Seagoville, Mansfield, Lancaster, Fort Worth, and the city of Dallas. As part of our operations, and we'll show you our video as I'm talking, we've built out our operations to align with the Walmart supply chain and workflows within the store locations for their specifically Walmart supercenters. For all of our locations, the Nest setup has been really essential into ensuring that Walmart's customers are able to receive their goods in 30 minutes or less. Here in the DFW Metroplex, we worked very closely hand in hand with Walmart to ensure that the site locations as well as the logistics for the setup aligned not only to city ordinances but also to Walmart's requirements to support their digital coaching or digital team for the orders that come in through the app. As you see here in the video, we make sure that our drones are kept safe at all of our site locations with the fenced-in area. Our drones, whether from store to door, are built with a full end-to-end system for autonomous drone delivery. So what that means is that on the back end, there is no one actually flying the drones. The drones are able to use GPS coordinates for residents when they put their order in, and then build out its flight plan, or what we call mission, to and from each customer's home. As you saw in the video, the drones also do not land when they arrive at the customer's homes. We want to make sure that in residential communities, we're keeping customers and our drones safe by keeping them off of the ground. So that delivery process, as you saw, the drones will hover at about 20-25 feet in the air, where it's lowering that package down to then be able to deliver to customers who've been tracking their orders in the app. Here in the DFW Metroplex, since launching back in 2021, we've been able to see a diversity of benefits that residents have been able to enjoy using our service. The big one that we always hear is safety as well as convenience. Traffic today in DFW, when you're coming up 35 or if you're heading to other parts of the city, can be very terrible, sometimes treacherous. And so customers are able to use our service to get those small package items that they need quickly and safely without having to leave the comfort of their homes. I've met couples who are in their 60s here in Lewisville. I've met retirees that are using this service here in Lewisville for everything from their over-the-counter medication when they're sick or having allergy symptoms. They're also using it for those small ingredients. I met a family here in Lewisville back in March, during March Madness, and they were making guacamole, realized that they were out of avocados, and were able to order those goods to their house. Our number one items that we see customers ordering from the Walmart is produce, and the second is over-the-counter medication. So again, providing access and mobility to residents here in DFW is something that we've been able to see across, again, all of those 19 cities that we operate with Walmart. In addition to that, we've also been able to lean in with schools and communities here in DFW as we think about the workforce development side of the drone aviation industry. We've met hundreds of students in high school as well as in college who are interested in engineering, becoming drone pilots, working in operations. Myself in government affairs, students are even interested in that because there are opportunities for them down the road. And so we've been able to go out into schools. We've done a number of different site visits at the Lewisville store with schools and college students as well who are interested in learning about Walmart as well as Wing's operations, which is something that we're very proud of. As you may know, for the delivery process, and as I mentioned before, our system is fully autonomous. So what that means is that, again, there's no one flying the drones on the back end using a joystick. When you put your address into the app, the drone is then assigned the order. But prior to that, customers are able to review a full catalog of items that meet that weight restriction of 2.5 pounds. And then they're able to also select their delivery spot at their home. So for some people we found here in Lewisville, they prefer to do the backyard because we know that porch pirates, things like that are a real issue sometimes. And so people feel more comfortable being able to use this feature in our app to select where their deliveries will go. And then as I mentioned before as well, we have a countdown clock and a cute little tracker with the drone that you see leaving from the store that flies to your home. It again helps to support that goal of convenience and fast delivery for all of the customers who use our service. This just again kind of reorientates you with what the drone actually looks like. Our system is built for safety from end to end. So the drones, as you see here, have 12 propellers on the top that support vertical landing and takeoff. If one propeller was to go down in one quadrant, the drone is still able to stay in the air. The same applies for those forward 4 propellers for forward propulsion. And lastly, the tether that you saw in the video that supports that delivery process at customers' homes, if let's say Miss Wilson that lives here in Lewisville leaves her dog outside during the delivery process, the dog runs out to the front yard and tries to grab the tether on the drone. Anything that pulls on that tether more than 3 times, the tether will detach from the drone. Miss Wilson will get a notification saying that her dog has been naughty, and then the drone also sends an error message back to our pilot team to let them know that there has been an issue. As part of that,
Ms. Lovett, can I pause you right there?
Sure.
This council is pretty aware of Wing and its systems and everything, so you're kind of preaching to the choir.
That sounds great. I love that.
We would love to go ahead and vote on this policy
sure,
and
I
move
can
that
jump
forward.
ahead.
I know there's a couple of questions from council.
Sure.
Could we, I don't know how much longer this presentation is.
Happy to jump ahead, and I jumped ahead to the site plan. I know that you all probably have that in your packets,
yes.
But I can also let Kimberly Horn come up if there's any site-specific questions, but happy to answer anything that the council members have.
I have a question. Can you go back, who's doing the slides? Go back to slide 7. Yeah, that's the slide I wanted. Number 1.
Yes.
I've never been able to get past that one.
Past the...
So is there a particular reason that you cannot cross I-35?
So that's a part of our flight operations protocols. So we set up what we call geofencing or safety features within the system to make sure that the drones are flying safely. There's also FAA restrictions that do come into play for how and where our drones operate. So specifically for I-35, I would definitely need to check with our flight operations team to confirm the exact rationale for that. Typically, we don't fly over highways for most of the cities that we operate in, but if you would like a more detailed explanation.
Yeah, I need a detailed explanation. I asked about 4 or 5 times in about 4 or 5 different emails, and I saw that we were going to Lewisville, right by 35, all the way to Flower Mound, but yet I couldn't get it just right across the highway.
On the other side of the highway.
Yeah,
Understood.
I kind of have a little bit of a problem with that.
Understood, yes, and I'm happy to check on that with our flight operations team and circle back to you all.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments for the team?
I had the same question
Same
as Ronnie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we either need y'all to build a Walmart on this side, and they're laughing, but we do need
yes,
a
ma'am.
Walmart market or something, or we need to figure out how we can service all of the citizens of Lewisville, not just the western citizens of Lewisville and Flower Mound.
Definitely. And that's something that our team on the flight operations side does regularly, is they will go back in and assess. As you know, the aerospace industry as a whole is continuing to evolve day by day, week by week, year by year. And so as the industry continues to grow and FAA protocols and regulations also evolve, that helps us to grow our range for how we get to customers.
Help us advocate for you, because I'm pretty sure that's going to be an FAA issue. We would love the opportunity to talk to somebody specific about that.
Definitely, and I would be happy to facilitate that. Our flight operations team, as you know, they're based in Coppell, Texas, so it can definitely make sure that we get that connection, and I will literally, before the end of this meeting, make sure to send that email to them.
So let me ask you this. 1171 is also a state road, but it's not
an interstate.
It's not an interstate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
it's a freeway.
Okay. So do you have the same stuff at the Walmart in the Colony? Do you have a flight pattern at the Walmart in the Colony?
In the
wings.
Colony, Texas?
Uh-huh.
So we don't have a site in the Colony right now.
She is not making friends with me.
Yeah, they come out of
Get her out of it real right now.
Well, I can give this answer. It's a Class B airspace for DFW. It's not authorized for their type of flight operation. That came from our chief.
That probably impacts our drones as well.
I'm sure she can confirm that, but I think there's
Yeah,
some
so again, I
restrictions.
don't know the maps and the roadways off the top of my head, so I would definitely can check that during this meeting.
Well, as you can tell, we have some folks that are really passionate about drone delivery and accessibility for our residents.
Understood.
So we are happy to be a champion for you guys.
Definitely. And again, I would need to allow them to assess, but as mentioned, so we do not fly in Class B and Class C airspace. So for the freeway that you're mentioning, if that does sit in that airspace, that would be part of that process. And unfortunately, that's something that's out of our control. That does come into part with the FAA regulations that are in place. But again, as those regulations and certification processes continue to evolve, we will be able to grow with that as well. And so it's not just the city of Lewisville. We have gotten that question from other cities that do sit near either Love Field or DFW Airport, as well as, for example, Fort Worth or parts that are near the military base out there. So we understand that there is a need, and that's something that we are definitely working to see how we continue to grow.
Well, we have a lot of land, so on the east side.
Yes, ma'am. And we also have a fantastic government affairs team that sits in Washington, D.C., and so they do a lot of that education and outreach work directly with the FAA to support that growth process.
The good
Walmart,
news is,
give us a hub.
Yeah, the good news is that we're excited about it, right? So that's the takeaway here. Is
No,
we're excited
yes.
about it. We like to see it happen in our neighborhoods as well.
Definitely, and I love to hear that. And again, definitely will make sure that I circle back to the powers that be to continue those conversations.
I also have to just kind of give some kudos here, because I'm super excited about whenever I see something innovative like this, and it's such a creative way to compete with online shopping. And I'm sure that's what caused this to happen. Like you get pressure from the online, the Amazons of the world, and you found a way to compete with online shopping in ways that's really, really interesting. I am curious about, so I get not being able to fly over 35, but we do have a Walmart, to your point, Councilwoman Cade, in the Colony. I'd rather keep that in Lewisville, but barring that, is there a reason why we can't? Is it only for superstores, only for stores of a certain size? Do we know why it can't be done in the Colony?
So as of now, we don't have a site or a nest location in the Colony, Texas. That is a two-part process. So we do work hand in hand with Walmart on the site selection. That's not something that Wing dictates. Okay. Walmart does a very close assessment and looking at the sites that would be ideal for drone delivery. But I don't know if Ryan, you want to speak
Looks
to
like
that?
he wants to get up here. Let's yeah.
And Ryan, if you need to talk to the mayor of the Colony, I can make a phone call.
I will take all the help I can get. Thank you.
Fair enough.
Ryan Trimble, A912 Lock Haven Drive, Dallas, Texas. Thank you all for having me tonight. It's really an exclusive opportunity. I say this to other cities, but truly you all are pioneers in this effort with Walmart, and we're really grateful for the partnership. We are looking at expanding our service in Lewisville. We have another drone partner as well. Zipline is the name of that partner. So we're looking to expand. But I will note the desire for the Colony store. Like Catherine was saying, we're assessing new stores. This is a target market, a pilot market for Walmart. We're really focused on this effort here to see how we can scale up and afford this opportunity to more people.
Now, listen, we love the bragging rights, so if you can figure out how to do it without that, then whatever.
We've brought your neighbor cities to come see your site, so you all are our show pony. So there you go.
Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments for the team? Ms. Lovett, I want to appreciate you for your flexibility on this one.
Totally fine.
We love what you guys are doing, and we're happy to continue to support what's going on. I do want to see where we are as far as this vote goes, but we will continue to help you guys in any way that we can. You've been a great asset. We just love to see more coverage in our city. It's tough being first.
Totally understand. And I will, once I sit down, I'll work on that
You
email.
have 3 members on council and their families and their families.
Yes.
And friends and neighbors and dogs that do not get to participate in this. And there's a lot on the east side of 35.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm assuming when it does expand that we'll still get our free cookie. That's very important to me.
Maybe not. We've done a lot of different ones, so maybe like a free Pepsi, or we've done mini pies. But I'll definitely put in the good word for sure.
Cake, some sort of pastry would be great. So
yes.
Very nice. Very nice. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, council. Based on that conversation, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the 2 alternative standards as set forth in the caption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, team. Item 5, consideration on ordinance of the Lewisville City Council amending the Lewisville City Code by amending Division 4 short-term rental units of Article 6, Chapter 4 to add subsection 4-201, parenthetical A-1, providing a maximum number of short-term rental unit permits that may be active at any given time, add subsection 4-201, parenthetical B1, providing closure of the STR unit permit application process and priority of applications, and amend subsection 4-201C, providing for the implementation of said maximum number of STR unit permits, providing a repealer, severability, and an effective date, and declaring an emergency. Staff is proposing new regulations aligned with the 2025 Vision Plan, aiming to protect the character of established residential neighborhoods while ensuring health and safety. The proposed regulations include setting a maximum limit on active short-term rental unit permits to maintain a balanced growth rate and prevent an oversaturation that could alter neighborhood identity. The maximum number of active STR permits would be set at 130 in 2025, representing approximately 0.5% of all residential parcels in Lewisville. It's recommended that the City Council approve the ordinances set forth in the caption above. I do have 2 comments available on this one. For the first one is from Ms. Ainsley Stelling. She appreciates the agenda item and is in full support of it. However, staff has mentioned the current number of permits keep them very busy. One can only assume that an increase of allowed permits by greater than 50%, 130 versus 77, could overtax current staffing levels for monitoring, authorizing, auditing, and code enforcement. Feel it's prudent to reduce the cap to 100 in order to balance permit demand with staff workload. The other comment I have was actually from Mr. Brent Myers. He is speaking on behalf of the Greater Lewisville Association of Realtors, and they are in opposition. With that, council, there are no comments or questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the ordinance set forth in the caption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the Lewisville City Council amending the Lewisville City Code by amending Division 4 short-term rental units of Article 6, Chapter 4 to add subsection 4-201A1, providing a maximum number of short-term rental STR unit permits that may be active at any given time, add section 4-201B1, providing closure of the STR unit permit application process and priority of applications, and amend subsection 4-201C, providing for the implementation of said maximum number of STR unit permits, providing a repealer, severability, and an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item H, reports. Reports about items of community interest regarding which no action will be taken. I'm going to start on the far end with Councilmember Kelly, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just, because the timing of this is actually great. So Carolyn, I'm glad you're still here. So I went out and I gave a little talk on small business and how the community supports small business to a group called LEAP, it's a networking group inside the community here. And when I hit upon all the awesome things that they can do at the makerspace to help support their business, the room was actually very excited. So they hadn't heard about this. They hadn't heard about the awesome things, the die cuts and all the machinery that's out there, the 3D printers. So I suspect you'll get a little uptick here shortly. But anyway, it presented very, very well. And for anybody listening that doesn't know about the makerspace out there on Hive out there in the Lewisville Public Library, worth the trip out there. It's fantastic. And that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Green?
I just wanted to mention that we do have some nasty weather on its way, so hope everybody has safe travels tonight and maybe batten down the hatches at the house.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
No report, sir.
Councilmember Cade?
Yeah, I would like to say,
Kudos to our street department. We have noticed the striping, and it is so wonderful to be able, I mean, it looks like what a difference the makeup on a street can make. But, you know, it is noticed. Great job. Well done.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Meredith?
Yes, Mayor, some library activities for the week. Adult Tiny Art Show drop-off for adults, Monday, March 3rd to the 17th. Art on display, April 7th to the 28th. Tiny Art Maker Night for adults, Tuesday, March 4th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Crawford Meeting Room. No registration is required. Elementary Explorations for children aged 6 to 8, Thursday, March 6th, 4:30 to 5:30. Bennett Program Room, a ticket is required. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Troyer?
Yeah, yes, I have a number of items for the Lewisville Grand Theater. First of all, performances, the Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra, silent film The Freshman with live score, silent film with music accompanying it, presented by the City of Lewisville, March 7th, and I understand this is almost sold out, so if you're interested, get online and get your tickets. Taking Flight, presented by the Metropolitan Winds, March 8th. And as always, the acoustic jam sessions every Friday night, presented by the Visual Art League of Lewisville. Activities, an art talk, The Evolution of Fiber Artist, presented by the Visual Art League of Lewisville on March 11th. And then there are two exhibitions going on right now. First of all, Power of the Flower, presented by the Visual Art League of Lewisville through March 29th. And LISD 2024-25 Art Show Middle School, presented by the LISD through March 15th. And that is all.
Thank you, sir. City Attorney? Secretary's Office? No? Anything, Marisha? Nothing? Nothing? Nothing?
We are holding strong at 92.5% full with the lake, 520.41 feet.
All right. Nothing? Anything? Chief?
To expand on Councilwoman Green's information about the storm. So they're expecting them to hit our area right now about 5 in the morning. Damaging winds are the main threat. This includes North Texas, so the possibility of tornadoes, to a lesser degree, hail. This is expected to impact our morning commute tomorrow morning. So emergency management will open at 3 a.m. this morning to monitor the weather for us, and we'll keep you updated if anything it needs to be informed.
Thank you, Chief. Chief? City Manager?
No, sir.
All right. I have nothing as well. We do have a section for closed session tonight. So in accordance with Texas Government Code, Subchapter D, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney pending litigation, City of Lewisville, Texas versus Massamean Mission, case number CV-2023-03139, City of Lewisville, Texas versus Motion R. Arjanani. Case number CV 2023-03136 in City of Lewisville, Texas versus City of Knowledge and Massamean Mission. Case number CV 2023-03138. All proceeding in eminent domain in the County Court of Law number 2 of Denton County, Texas. Section 551.072 real estate property acquisition and section 551.087 economic development deliberation regarding economic development negotiations. We will go ahead and break into closed session. All right, we're going to reconvene back into regular session, and as there is no further action to be taken on tonight's agenda, we stand adjourned.
I would say Christian would have done it better, but drone twins drug this out.